Here's how it really went down. 2 days after I moved into a quiet place on Red Cedar Bay, Wisconsin, a camera on my porch caught a man in a windbreaker walking down to my dock at 3 in the morning with a red gas can. He splashed and flicked a lighter, and my screen went orange. And by sunrise, the boards that sold me on this house were black as coffee grounds. Before the fire, there were chainsaws, and before the chainsaws, there was a clipboard, and before the clipboard, there was me, a tired marine fabricator, who finally thought he'd bought one piece of earth no committee could touch. You know what I mean. My name is Nate Porter. 15 years of barges and repair yards made me stubborn in all the ways that count. I sold my share of a small shop, picked a lake where the loons keep time, and fell for a 62-foot dock, with gray boards and old iron cleats built in 1988, permitted, inspected, grandfathered, and the first place in a long time that felt like it belonged to me. The welcome committee arrived like a parade in pastels. Blonde bob, pastel blouse, clipboard held like a badge. 2 guys who looked like they trained by frowning at clouds. "Good morning, I'm Linda Parson with the Hickory Bluffs Association. We wanted to greet you and address an urgent matter," she sang, then glanced over my shoulder at the water and said, "My dock didn't meet their shoreline aesthetic standards and needed to be removed by Friday. And when I told her my parcel wasn't in the association, and the dock had more birthdays than their Facebook group, she smiled the way people smile right before they write you a ticket and said, 'If you won't comply, our contractor will handle removal, you'll be billed.' And yeah, that happened. The next morning, a neighbor named Lee called with the voice people use when they're looking at a wreck. 'Nate, there are guys on your dock with saws, thought you hired them,' until I spotted Linda with that clipboard. I took a corner hot enough to baptize my floor mat in coffee and slid into the drive to find orange vests and teeth on chains, chewing through cedar, a 10-foot bite taken out of the middle, like a beaver with anger issues, had learned to use gas, and when one of the crew yelled that I couldn't be there because of a work order, I asked who signed it, and he thumbed at Linda, so I walked out onto my own dock, dialed 911, stood in the gap where boards used to be, and waited with my boots gritting sawdust into the grain, while the lake breathed like nothing was wrong. The deputies carried the look of men who'd sat through HOA meetings against their will. I handed them a folder with the deed, the map, the 1988 permit, and they walked to Linda while she launched into harmony and guidelines and sightlines. And then they came back, stone-faced, and told me the crew was done, stop work, documented damage statements now or later. So I said now because ink matters. And when Linda said I was making it difficult, I pointed at the water and told her my dock was here before their bylaws had a font. And if you've ever worked for a living, you know the quiet that follows a violation. It's not peace, it's focus.
I called an attorney named Ava Morales, who has a backbone, like keel steel. We walked the wreck with a tape and a notepad, and she said, trespass, vandalism, interference, with quiet enjoyment. We'll file and we'll win. And the association countered with a lawsuit, padded with words like visual harmony and reputational damages, like their newsletter was scripture. So we put on clean jackets and went to court, where Eva laid out deed aerials. The county zoning officer who swore under oath my parcel sat outside Hickory Bluff's jurisdiction. Then she pulled one clean card. I owned 51% of White Oak Landing, LLC, a modest legal marina with 14 slips, and 7 of those slips were leased by Hickory Bluff's members. The judge glanced at the list, glanced at Linda, and dismissed their case like a fly. No jurisdiction, no demolition. Any further interference will be treated as criminal, he said, and I went home to sit on the jagged edge of my dock with a beer and the kind of patience you get when you've been told to wait by people who never lifted anything heavier than a clipboard. 2 nights later, the camera pinged. Motion at the water, A windbreaker in the dark, a splash of gasoline, and a cheap lighter. My dock lit up like a sunrise that hated me, and I was in boots with an extinguisher before the second flame reached the first smoke, slicing my throat, foam hissing. The shoreline spared, but another 12 feet gone by dawn. And when the investigators showed up, they took samples and watched the footage in my kitchen, and didn't need a degree in crime to see. It was Linda's husband, Rick. No mask, no hood, the same shoes sitting in their garage, and the sheriff didn't make a speech online. He just cuffed him for felony arson and criminal damage. And yeah, Rick's mugshot did numbers, because when you burn wood in a county where every third building is wood, you don't get a sympathy tour. Linda went for the other weapon, gossip, a peach paper special edition newsletter on porches with a photo of my charred dock and a headline. Pretending it had ignited itself online posts calling it Porter's War Dock and hinting I was leasing to the public without a license, and strangers asked fair questions, because rumors are tidy when you don't have to live with them. So Eva sent a certified cease and desist with a stack of receipts that could paper a small courthouse, and I called a quiet meeting in the back of the bait shop with my co-owners and the tenants of White Oak Landing. We laid out the LLC agreement, 14 active leases the permits, and I asked one question by blind ballot. Do you still want Hickory Bluffs members renting here, given what you've seen? The count came back 12-1. No, with one abstain. I sealed it in an envelope and didn't drop the hammer yet, because sometimes timing is the whole job. Instead, I planned a simple afternoon called Open Dock Day. Kids casting at noon, 2 food trucks donations to a regional veterans rehab program. Safety lines strung and load points checked 3 times, and people came in like a tide. Not a mob, but enough to make a certain kind of man in cargo shorts nervous. The sheriff sent a deputy who walked the planks and said it all looked legal, while a bored guy named Todd muttered into his phone like he was inventing a fire to put out later. And we were fine. Until there was that crack. You never forget if you know wood an older cross plank scheduled for reinforcement gave under too many bodies leaning to see a fish. A 12-year-old boy shot backward into the water legs, fouled in a coil of rope, and he didn't come up. So I didn't think I dove, worked his ankle free from a beam, and pushed him up, while my lungs filed. Complaints with my heart pulled him onto the deck. Paramedics checked him while he sobbed into a towel and gripped a hot chocolate, like it could rewind the day. His name was Eli, and he was the grandson of a Hickory Bluffs board member, and by dinner, there was a clip online titled, Lake Rescue at Open Dock Day, and the comments were not kind to clipboards. That man saved a kid while your board was printing peach paper, one said. And for once, I didn't have to argue, because the town did it for me. The twist came in ink, not in flame. Eva flagged a vendor on the chainsaw invoice called Lakeshore Integrity Partners, LLC, which sounds official until the state licensing board says who, and a subpoena later. It turns out the shell was formed by Linda's accountant 4 months earlier, and the money used to pay for the illegal demolition carried fingerprints from a conservation grant meant for shoreline habitat, and erosion control taxpayer cash routed to chop a permitted dock outside their jurisdiction. And the Inspector General did not clap. Subpoenas landed on Linda the accountant and the association's books, while Rick kept his arson charge warm, and I opened my envelope and served 60-day notices to the 7 Hickory Bluffs renters at White Oak Landing, with case-by-case mercy for the decent ones and a quicker exit for the loud liars. The wait list tripled, and we hung a sign that read, White Oak Landing, private veteran, owned non-HOA affiliated, trespassers prosecuted, and someone sent me a photo of Linda reading it from her SUV with her jaw at half-mast. The board cracked like old paint. 2 members resigned. The treasurer vanished behind a for sale sign. The emergency election fizzled. A dissolution petition crossed 2/3 and moved to the county I didn't dance. I rebuilt composite boards and steel anchors because a thing that holds weight should hold weight slow and stubborn, with neighbors who brought casseroles and nail guns, like both counted as food. The last plank went down under a pewter sky. We bolted a small bench at the end and a plaque that says burned by bullies, rebuilt by law. A dozen people gathered without being asked. No speeches, just nods, and the sound of line guides humming. And Eli showed up in a life vest, 2 sizes too big, with a tackle box that looked heavier than his arm, and said his grandpa told him to work off the new rod he wanted. Could he help? And I pointed at the vest and told him, "Rule 1 is wear that like your life depends on it because one day it might." And he grinned and went to coil rope, which is how boys become men around a dock. People ask for the moral, like it's a fable, and I'm supposed to say the fox learned not to light matches. The moral is boring, and it wins documents. Boundaries matter, and if you're going to make a rule, make sure it protects people. Not power. I'm not against neighborhoods agreeing on mailbox colors. If that's the glue that keeps winter from splitting them. I'm against folks who mistake a clipboard for a badge and somebody else's deed for a blank page. You don't fix that with gasoline or gossip. You fix it with receipts and a deputy who reads a map instead of a group post. You fix it by standing in the gap. Someone cuts out of your life and refusing to move until the truth is nailed down. If you stuck with me to the end, thank you. Hit like. So the algorithm doesn't pin the peach paper at the top of your feed. Subscribe if you want more real stories with receipts, and tell me in the comments where you draw the line. Are HOAs saving neighborhoods or suffocating them? Where does community end and private rights begin? Have you watched a petty power trip turn dangerous? And what did justice look like when it finally showed up? You tell me, I'll be on that bench with cedar on my hands and a coffee listening.